Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Anders, dear Amir, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And we would like to spend, so my colleague Suti and I, we like to spend the next 15 minutes or so to essentially present you a little bit of our research on how to make the digital transformation work. And in particular, because like you rightly say, it's quite a big topic, we want to present you a particular take on it. And the question we want to explore now is the idea of when we talk about the future of work, what is actually the right amount of togetherness in working in digital environment. Think about, for instance, working for platform-based businesses, the idea of working for an Uber, for an Airbnb, or think about high-tech workplaces where you work with artificial intelligences. And the question is then, of course, what is the right amount of cooperation? What is the right amount, the right degree of communication? And that is what we want to explore in the, by now, 14 minutes which are left. So, maybe to recap a little bit also for those of you who have been here this morning, it's always somewhat thankful to start a talk about the future of work with looking at recent press coverage. And it's also somewhat thankful because the topics do not change that much from year to year. Here you see some covers from the last 6 months or so. The topics are as follows. The big question, of course, the future of jobs, or what we heard in this very insightful talk by our honorary doctor this morning. The better question would, of course, be the future of task, right? What are future jobs gonna entail? Which kind of like tasks are we actually gonna do, and how have we to revision tasks, right? And jobs that are composed of tasks. The big question also for the rest of the today is the question of artificial intelligence and how it is actually to work with artificial intelligence. For instance, in terms of being managed by an artificial intelligence, being observed by an artificial intelligence, or what might also be the perception of being observed and guided by autonomous agents, by AIs. Another question is, of course, the whole idea of this new kind of like economy, right? This kind of like secondary economy, which we witnessed in the last 10 years, the whole idea of the gig and platform economy. To have that a little bit more graphical, a little bit more in a figurative sense, we would like, at least for the next now 30 minutes or so, we want to propose that this kind of like new economy is essentially made up or is composed of a number of trends. One being, for instance, the idea of that the way that we create becomes more collaborative. Collaborative between, for instance, more people with different skill sets, between men and machines. But the idea is that value creation, especially, remember earlier this morning, if we talk more about tasks and becoming specialized in certain tasks, then it becomes somewhat conceivable that we have to combine our specialities much better in the future, and that comes, of course, with demands to communication and demands to interaction. On the other hand, platforms and organizations in the foreseeable future become more open, right? Think about organizations collaborating, think about functions being shared between different organizations, think about a tighter integration between consultancies, corporates, and maybe people that are, you could call them communities around an organization. Now, we tend to talk a lot about the idea of corporate labor, right? The idea of working a 9-to-5 job, which of course also is a changing notion. Think about new work arrangements, maybe working 4 times a week, working 3 times a week, having different time arrangements over a lifetime. Think about teleworking, think about the idea of enterprise social media or the integration of expert and artificial intelligence systems. There's, of course, more to it. There is the emergence of the whole platform economy, right? What we are talking now for 10, 15 years with increasing intensity, the idea, for instance, of crowdsourcing, having communities involved in our value creation processes, in our ideation processes. Think about the whole platform economy, Uber, Airbnb, Innocentive, and so on and so forth. Think about online freelancing, or think about the whole idea of microwork, essentially having people associate with the organization, if at all, only for very minute tasks on a day-to-day, hour-for-hour basis. I think for a fuller picture, we also have to talk about aspirational labor, the idea of, for instance, labor, the idea of young people who are maybe not even in the job market yet, who don't really earn a living, but do functions which are labor-like. Think about computer game modding, think about creative endeavors, think about the transition, essentially, of people going from hobbies to maybe exploring their hobbies on a platform to then going to full-time employment. Bigger, more complete picture, which also, when we talk about careers, gives us interesting insights coming up. But our thesis now, for the next foreseeable 10 minutes or so, is that also corporate labor is changing, right? That corporate labor is becoming more open, is becoming more platform-like, is becoming also more demanding in terms of communication. I give you an example, actually two examples now for new ways of career, which is a topic which is highly interesting, at least for us in our research here at BI. And that is, for instance, the idea of how jobs transition and how the different levels of the digital economy actually do interact. Imagine, for instance, a fitness Instagrammer, I don't know, call him Amir, call him Anders, call him Christian, maybe not so much Christian, but imagine somebody who likes to make their hobby public. And it is, of course, then conceivable that this hobby at some point might become something which you at least explore for a few hours a day, a week, like becoming a fitness trainer, maybe mediated by a platform, which then might lead you maybe to finding your dream job as a physiotherapist. The interesting question then in terms of research is, of course, how do different skill sets and how do different inspirations work together to the benefit of that person and to the benefit of the overall economy. So if your cup of tea is not so much fitness or Instagram, imagine the other way around. Imagine, for instance, a talented young programmer, maybe call her Eljan, maybe call her Suti, and that programmer, for instance, has a very good job, coding, maybe working on some artificial intelligence, but maybe she very much likes in her free time to explore other areas of, for instance, programming, artificial intelligence, like modding, computer game modding, which might enlarge her skill set, which in turn might then help her to succeed on a platform environment, right? For instance, imagine top coder, right? And all these interplays are interesting questions, for instance, in terms of human resources, in terms of how you build capabilities, but also of people working for different platforms, for different employers, maybe even during one day, and what that essentially means in terms of, for instance, identification. Now, simplifying a little bit, but let's continue our exploration a little bit in a dichotomy between gig labor, imagine an Uber driver, a Foodora bicycle rider, and somebody who works augmented labor, augmented by computer technology, maybe by an AI assistant. Is everything well in, for instance, working gig labor? Of course not. This number is, for instance, one of our own research with the European Commission. Most people who, for instance, work Uber, Foodora, have the perception that their platform doesn't really care for them, right? That their organization is not really an organization to which you can talk to which you can build a relationship. The difficulty or the transition which we are right now seeing in terms of designing better platforms is that platforms tend to be right now designed platform to provider, platform to user, but it's a very much unidirectional way of essentially organizing work, whereas it might be much better to also facilitate interaction between users to create mutual learning, to create emotional attachment, and so on and so forth. We will talk a little bit about the benefits of actually making platforms more social, of essentially creating lightweight organizations like platform that deal better with essentially leveraging things which we can do reasonably well already in traditional organizations. Now think about more traditional organization. Think about, for instance, your typical desk worker, your typical teleworker. Maybe you heard the statistics. I think you might relate to that in your own working life, but imagine getting an email and being interrupted by an email, and statistics or surveys tell you time and again that interruptions essentially kill your concentration. Every email tends to get you out of your work, what you were doing for around 50 minutes until you can return to your previous task with the same kind of efficiency. Again, we have a little bit of a challenge here, not of too little communication, think about platforms, but too much communication. And the danger, if we use all these opportunities of augmented labor, artificial assistance, working more between organizations, of essentially overwhelming our attention resources, right? How do we manage that? How do we make that so that people can actually thrive in this digital environment? Example here, imagine typical organization, your organization, different functions, and imagine, of course, you having maybe partners, you having customers, and maybe you having a function which is particularly good in something. Maybe you have a very good R&D department, maybe you have a very good marketing department. And I think the reality for all of you guys is that increasingly that you tend to collaborate with other organizations, that you have cross-functional teams or cross-organizational teams that then have to communicate, that have to coordinate increasingly through digital means, and of course with all the friction that might go with that, right? The essential dilemma of you have more opportunities for collaboration, but you as a human being or your team as a coalition of human beings might struggle with taking all that information in. And now going into our research, the dilemma, right, or the idea why we should actually care is that if you imagine with a somewhat limited pool of human resources, at least people that are able to thrive in that environment, especially here on the right-hand side, people who have skills which are hardly replaceable by computers, people who are curious, people who are creative, people who are empathetic, they might suffer the most, right? Because they are demanded the most, both for more augmented type of labor, but also think about platform labor. And here the conundrum, of course, being that the higher value your value creation, the more collaborative your creation is, the more you are reliant on particular person. So that is a little bit of a background. And now the question is, of course, how may we design modes of communication that foster an optimal degree of togetherness? Not too much, not too little. And my colleague, Professor Suti Wong, is now presenting 2 pieces of research that actually look at this conundrum.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christian. So as Christian discussed just now, we can see that the economy is changing, and so is the nature of work. So we witnessed that the new technology development are very exciting, and yet it has a tendency to pushing us towards to working more independently with less boundaries. And so we can see that independence is a good thing. It can be a good thing. So they give us more autonomy. We can choose when and how and where we want to work, which is good. But it also comes with a challenge in the sense that we will have a harder time to connect ourselves to others. And so our research center has been looking into different areas in that regard. And we have so much want to share with you, but we have so limited time. And so that in this platform, now we have chosen 2 studies just to illustrate why we're saying we need to find the optimal togetherness in this digital era. All right. So here are the 2 studies. So one study is looking into cloud worker, which normally we see that they're working in isolation. And so this study, we're looking into why some individual trying to get out of that bubble and trying to work together with some other in a virtual environment. So the second study, we're looking at it the other way around. So we're looking into individual working in virtual teams, right? So we're now in teams. Of course, we are together, And that's the meaning of teams, right? And however, why is that some individual working in a virtual team feel themselves isolated? And what happened then? All right, so that are the two studies that we want to share with you. So let us look at the first study first, the crowd worker. And so this study, we collected data from around 300 crowd workers online. And so we wanted to see what they do in trying to craft their own work, craft their career as a crowd worker. And so we asked them the degree to which that they will trying to redefine the skill sets and how they may trying to find a good practice in order to change their routine, or how they handle different kind of clients, and or how to avoid different clients to shape their relationship on those platforms, right? And then 3 months after, we also asked them the degree to which they try to reach to some other also on the platform working in a similar manner, to ask them to exchange idea on how they may improve their work situations, or even join together in crafting practices that can be implemented online, right? And then 3 months after, we asked them in general sense how well they are feeling themselves in terms of their life, and the degree to which that they can cope with difficult situations. All right? And so that's how it is going. Think about here is Tom. So Tom is working as a crowd worker, and he's pretty confused at sometimes how he can improve his task or efficiency, or making more money, or making even a career out of that, right? And so he tried different things, and trying to redefine his work routine, and trying to find out which clients are better to work with, or what kind of skill set that he can develop so that he can get himself to be a master level. Well, somehow it's working, but he failed a lot of time. And then he tried to reach out to the others, asking these people also on the platform and how they do, and he shared his practice and so forth, right? And he found out, okay, I actually learned a lot from the others. And yet, he stayed passive. But what we see in the data is that for those individuals, actually, not only they craft alone, but they join others together to craft together. Those are the ones that feel pretty good about themselves, and they even see a potential develop a long life career on a cloud work format. And so we need to see someone staying with us together in order to see a future out of it. So here's the second study that we want to share. Looking into people working in virtual team. So the definition of virtual team is that team members are sitting in different geographical offices that can be across the city or across country, and you may not have a regular face-to-face encounter with those individuals. All right? And so here's Amy. She is Amy. So she's working in a virtual team setting. She's in general pretty happy with the arrangement because that gives her a lot of flexibility, all right? And so in this study, we did a diary study with around 120 individuals working in virtual team. So we sent out a very short diary survey to those individuals every second day for 2 weeks. And just to see how their feeling about their work fluctuate on a daily level. And so Amy started with feeling pretty general about happy about those arrangements, pretty happy about that. And because those flexibility that provide her, at times she may stay at home to do the work because it doesn't bound to the office, right? However, on that particular day when Amy stayed at home working, she felt actually more isolated. Even she knew all the way along she's working in a virtual team. And normally, why we would stay home and work? because we want the concentration. We don't want the disturbance. We don't want anyone coming in to us so that we would disturb our work. And although on those particular days when Amy communicated less with her team or with her leader, she felt even more isolated. But just isolation alone is okay. But when Amy also felt she's confused about her role in those tasks, how she could involve, or how she could push it further for those tasks, she felt really helpless at work. Does it sound something familiar to yourself, to your work situation? And so we also see that when Amy feels isolated and she's confused about her work, she felt helpless, and she also sees that she couldn't coordinate with the team. And so in this study that we observed, we could see that there can be some simple solution. Simple yet can be hard. All right? And so our hope is that not only the individual worker can be aware of this solution, but the organization, right? How can they push good practices in this increasing independent work? So first thing we see is that the right amount of communications is important, right? So in the past 5 years or so, we could see that there is an increased amount of different kind of digital communication to push to the market, then help organizations to increase interactions in organization. So what that signal us? That signal us there is a need of increasing interactions with an organization, for sure. But however, what we see is that there has to be a strategy on how to optimize those tools. There has been some study done showing that when organizations do not have an actually conscious choice of those tools and just push it to all the employees, they got reduced communication within the organization because they felt overwhelmed, right? And there are also studies showing that according to different tasks, we should use different media, right? For tasks such as like a circulating task routine or information that are straightforward, we should use more text-based linear media in order to get there. But however, for tasks that are more complex, problem solving, negotiation, then we need to use media that are richer, right? Video conferencing, that you can actually sense more of how those individuals are feeling, right? So like here, the example of a donut. How many of you know about donut or have been using donut? Right, so it is an add-on app on Slack for a Slack user, right? So basically, it will randomly pair individuals in the organization to do an informal coffee or lunch together, just to let us connect, because at times, we can become too independent in our own world, right? But we have to find the balance of it. The second thing we see is that we need to become more curious. And what we find is that the more curious we are, we have more tendency to reach out, right? And research also showing that the more curious we are, we got more engaged in things that we like to do, but also engage in the things that we don't like to do so much because we want to improve them, right? And so for organization, fostering a learning climate, a learning culture is important. We have to celebrate curiosity. We have to celebrate failure and how we can learn from that. Right? The last thing, probably there are tons of things that we can improve, right? Is that we see that individuals that are proactive in looking into how they can do better, how they can take charge of what they do, they are better off in a digital age. Think about in a virtual environment, If you don't reach out, no one will knock on your digital door and saying, hey, can I help you? No, right? We have to be in charge of our destiny and how we can get us out there to connect to the others, to be curious, and so forth. According to growth mindset, there is a lot of power nested in the word yet. For example, I cannot drive an airplane, but that doesn't mean that I cannot drive an airplane in the future time. If I want to, I will, right? And so instead of saying that I cannot drive an airplane, we should say, I cannot drive an airplane yet, right? The future is for us to decide. We have to take charge of it and take that initiative and push us forward, push the togetherness, and so that not to let the technology let us to work alone. Thank you.